Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Well, looks like Donald Trump lost again. It's like the 15th, 20th time lost in the 2020 election. This time, a trio of Utah brothers sought to throw Joe Biden out of the White House. Took their case to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court decided not to hear it. So I guess it's over. Another rejection, another one of those moments where we're going to replace Biden and bring. It was one of those. We're bringing Trump back. There was a glimmer of hope, and well, the Supreme Court slammed the door. Now, interestingly enough, on the Trump front, the Fulton County, Georgia special grand jury, evidently recommendations for multiple people to be indicted. The one comment that's getting a lot of play was by one of the jurors who was asked whether they had recommended indictment for Donald Trump, and she said that, well, you're not going to be shocked. It's not rocket science. You won't be too surprised. And you go, okay, I'm not. Who? If I'm not going to be surprised, is it going to be Trump? Maybe. Is it going to be Rudy Giuliani? Is it going to be Sidney Powell? Is it going to be Lynn Wood? Is it going to be Lindsey Graham? I now have to know. What we are going to find out soon enough. But multiple people possibly for indictment. Should be a fun summer. Should be fun. Also, today, spent a little time in Washington, D.C. Decided to go and have some meetings, talk with some supporters, just kind of get a feel for how things are going. They're out of session, so you get to talk with people who, know what's going on. So I spent the day, roaming around, the Rayborn and the Longworth building, and I spent some time, wandering around the Capitol grounds, talking with people, and wow, Republicans are losing their mind over the fact that Joe Biden went to Ukraine. Literally losing their minds that how dare he won't go visit, rattle off the southern border or Ohio, or how dare he go to Ukraine? How dare he talk about saving those Ukrainians' pensions? And I was sitting in the Longworth Building's cafeteria area, and I was waiting for somebody, and I was just reading my book, and there was a table full of like 8 staffers. They clearly Republican staffers, because they were losing their minds, and they were going, how dare we? We're going to start World War III. We're going to do all this stuff. And all of your right wing talking points, they got them down. Of course they got them from the Heritage Foundation and the RNC, and so they've got it all down, and they're singing from the same hymnal. They're singing from the same book, and when there was a break, I kind of looked at one of them and I said, I guess you're Republican staffers, and he kind of sheepishly and I was shocked, kind of sheepishly said, yeah. Probably didn't want me to know. I go, I don't want to know who you work for. Just was curious if you were. I go, have you thought about the fact that for $100 billion, the Russian military has been basically destroyed, and that we spent trillions of dollars throughout the Cold War trying to do that, and it was just $100 billion that we gave the Ukrainians to defend themselves? Have you thought about that at all? And it was one of these, kind of like he didn't know what to say, because someone had, I wasn't going to yell at him. I was just going to, have you thought about this? Have you thought about the fact that if we don't stop them in Ukraine, Poland's next. And what that means is if they go into Poland, a NATO country, that means we have to send you, because there will be a draft if we get into this major war. You and people like you in your early 20s who are going to be drafted to go into this, and it's not going to be it's not going to be a ground acquisition war, because ultimately, if you go into Poland, that means the West and NATO have to defend Poland, and the Russians know they can't win that. So what does that mean? That means either they're going to pull in the Chinese and the Iranians, so we have a new axis of evil, and who knows where that goes? I mean, does this just get uglier and uglier as they roll, the machine rolls on down the road, or do we start lobbing nukes at each other? The Ukrainians fighting for themselves, because look, the Rage Against the War Machine people were still there. Were a couple of them lingering around the Capitol. Had a chance to talk to some of them as well, and look, I love the idea of I'm anti-war myself most of the time. This is not one of those moments. This is a moment where you go, Russia clearly invaded Ukraine. Oh, but the Nazis! No. Russia clearly invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is a sovereign country. Whether it's a democratic country or not, we can debate and argue if we have to. But the simple fact is, Putin invaded Ukraine. As a citizen of this planet, of this globe, that can't happen. And you can't allow that steamroller to continue. Because Poland's next, and the Baltic states are coming, which is why they're sending so much, and they're supporting this so heavily. So we had this little conversation around this, and I said, the reality is when I was your age, the concern was, it was the end of humanity, that we would be kind of in a moment of lobbing nukes at each other. Had someone told me all we'd have to do is spend $100 billion to take down their war machine, I think that's a pretty reasonable deal. But the Republicans, and this is where I'm still struggling. I'm struggling with the fact that you have Republican legislators, probably who those kids worked for, out there saying that we should pull the money away from them, we should leave Ukraine out on an island, screw them, let Russia do whatever they want, and my other favorite, we should engage in diplomacy. Now, this is one of those moments, like I tried to explain to my kids. I said, I don't want you starting fights. I don't want you throwing the first punch. I don't want you to be the one looking for trouble. You try and get yourself out of it. If something happens, turn and walk away. But the second that you realize that there's no more talking, that someone is already beating you up, you got to defend yourself. You got to ball up your little digits and you got to go at it. This is one of those moments where, what are you going to talk about? What diplomacy are you going to bring to the table? And this is what I asked, the two people who were still there from the Rage Against the War Machine. I'm going, okay, sell me on the idea that we pull all the resources that we've given to Ukraine away. We pull the rug out from under them. How does the war end? And diplomacy. I'm like, yeah. You've said diplomacy. What diplomatic measures were you going to take? And again, they had no answer. And this is my problem with people who have these great ideas. They've got no answers. For me, the answer is you have to stop them in Ukraine. The Ukrainian people have to defend themselves. I do not advocate sending any American troops. I was not in favor of sending American planes to enforce a no-fly zone. None of our blood should be there. But ensuring that they have a level playing field seems pretty rational, seems pretty sane. So when the president goes over there and says, we're committed to you. We're committed to giving you the things that you need to help defend yourself, that just sent Republicans into a tizzy. And you could feel it just from the staffers who were around me talking about the issue and talking about the opportunity to attack the administration. Because of course, he hasn't gone to Ohio yet. And of course, the border, because they're always going to beat him up over the border. But then again, where's their fix? I know. We want to build a big wall, a big, beautiful wall. Because we're going to stop the drugs from coming into the country. And the sad reality is we know how the drugs get into the country. White people bring it in through legal checkpoints. How about we stop every product at the border, especially from China? Can't do that. No, that would be bad. But I found it interesting, and look, I love going to D.C. I love going to our nation's capital. There's so much there to see, and so many interesting, different, people that you run into because, I think I ran into like 6 or 7 people who weren't speaking English, and I couldn't figure out what they were speaking. But the fact that they were there and in awe of what we have built is pretty impressive and worth saving, I think. But I'll get to more of that a little bit later. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, just a couple minutes ago, Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona tweeted out, America should withdraw all personnel and equipment from Ukraine or adjacent thereto. Congress has not authorized war there. America should not send them one more cent, not one more cent, to defend the border. And I'm going, again, what comes next? What comes next? And how much is Russia paying you? I mean, I keep coming back to this. How much is Russia paying these people? How much Russian money filtered through the NRA has gotten into the pockets of these representatives? I mean, when you stop and you think about it, it's really quite... we've got the best best democracy money can buy, but I got to wonder who's bought it. Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. I've got a couple of things to say, and the first one is I've got to share this with you. There was an article in the Washington Post today. Do you remember the conspiracy theory that I shared with you all?
Which one?
The one I made up.
Oh, yeah, okay.
There was an article in WAPO today about questioning whether the Catholic Church was getting too powerful and bringing up how many SCOTUS justices there were that were Catholic. So I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, that's been around for a while, though. That one's been banging around.
So the second thing I wanted to say was the Republicans are going to flip out about anything dealing with Biden. I was speaking to someone yesterday, in fact, a council member in our little hamlet, and she was going on and on about how bad Biden was. And I proceeded to throw out, well, do you know, and, I'm bringing up the job numbers and everything else, and she was looking at me, and I said, you watch Fox News? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, okay. And I thought, well, that explains it. But I think the big thing is because the Republican Party has been pretty much bought by Russia. I mean, that's really the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah,
so
just look at what they're doing. I mean, the fact that I cannot fathom, and I can't get it through my thick skull. And this is what I was telling these staffers, these young kids who work for these representatives. When I was back when we were that age, we were still in the Cold War. And the fact that now we're siding with Russia is just it's almost more than I can take. Other than I understand, Russia hates the same people they do. I get it. I kind of get that, and that the money has filtered down, but I'm still struggling with it.
It has. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is what it
Vic,
is.
you have a good evening.
Thanks,
Vic.
Alice. I appreciate it. No, I mean, look, it's one of those things. I literally can't understand what the Republican Party is thinking. The party of Reagan. It is what it is. Now, also, Marjorie Trainwreck Green has her national divorce comments have gotten a ton of attention, and not the kind I think that she wanted. Because I'm looking at the comments, because I threw a comment out saying, look, the sad reality is red states take more money from the federal coffers than blue states. You've got blue states subsidizing these red states, and maybe we should talk about doing something about that. Now, understand, here's where my thinking is. I just wanted to point it out. I didn't mean to start a civil war. Because immediately the red states are, well, we got all the farmland and you wouldn't eat and all this stuff. And they go, who subsidizes the farmers? A massive farm bill. Massive. So if we didn't subsidize that, the price of crops would have to be astronomical, or the people producing those crops would have to work in poverty wages and poverty conditions. My other problem with this idea of splitting and punishing red states is because I know who gets punished. It's working people. It's people like you and me. It's the folks who get up every day and try and make it through to tomorrow. That's who's going to take it on the chin. It's who always does. The rich and powerful, they're going to be fine. The big landowners, the big corporate special interests, they're going to be just fine. But it's going to be working people who are going to take it on the chin. But I do think it's important pointing out that these red states, I think it was 8 out of the top 10 states that take more from the federal government than they contribute, are red states. And you know which ones they are. They're the southern ones. They're the ones who have the higher poverty rates. They're the ones who have the lower life expectancy rates. They're the ones who have the lowest unionization rates, which means their wages are lower. Their health security is lower. They didn't expand Medicaid. All of these things that make life difficult for working people. And interestingly enough, what they've done, and this is where it's brilliant on Marjorie, three names is a spot, because understand, she's in a blue state. Biden won that state. You have John Ossoff won that state along with Raphael Warnock, and then Warnock won it again. So it's a blue state with a crazy right-wing zealot congresswoman. And I look at this and I go, I don't want to divorce the country. I don't think you can separate the country. I think it would be dangerous. I think it would be terrible. I think we would be constantly at war with each other. We'd have trade wars. We'd have all kinds of horrible. And within states, because what this plays into is that rurals versus the urbans. And I can't tell you how many people I saw in the comments, because I did. I wasted some time on the train today because I love taking the train into D.C. It's so easy. I wish we had more public transit and better public transit all across the country, but that's a different story. I wish I could get on a train here in Harrisburg and get into D.C., straight without having to go to Philadelphia and all the way around. But if we were to tear everything apart, it would be highly destructive. And understand why she did that on President's Day. The reason she threw that out was, one, to just to get some attention, but two, and most importantly, is to continue to keep us divided and pitted against each other, so that we don't talk about the things that are our common values. I bring this up because there's a great video going around on the Twitters of a guy from East Palestine, and he's very candid. Just a working class guy who says, "Look, the most important thing is profit, not these people." He says it's just BS, and calls the companies blanking cowards and on and on, and this is the reality of where we could bring people together. Because the sad reality, these big companies, they don't care about you or me or anybody else. They don't care about the water that these people drink. And he said, look, do you think the crops that are going to be grown in this area, anyone's going to buy? He goes, I'm not going to eat this stuff from here. These people aren't going to be able to, their livelihoods are over now. And it comes down to, again, the people at the bottom getting steamrolled. I played a George Carlin clip not too long ago of him saying, look, the liberals and the Democrats are for people, helping people. The Republicans are for, and conservatives are for big money special interests. They're for corporations and the greedy. And, for me, this again comes back to, as I've talked about before, this idea of which side are you on in this divide? In this train wreck divide, where do you find yourself? And, what Marjorie Three Names and Lauren Boebert and the rest of them are in the process of doing is changing the narrative. Look how bad government is. Look at how badly government did this. Now remember, these are the very people who back during the Obama years held the country hostage and the globe hostage to screw every agency out of a portion of their budget. You remember Screwquester? Do you remember we were right at the end of the road? We were going to go into default if Democrats and Obama didn't give up. I think it was a 2% across the board cut. You go, wow, it's only 2%. You go, yeah, it's 2% over the course of decades. And what does that mean? That means, well, less opportunity to inspect, less opportunity to regulate, less opportunity to hold people accountable. Now, I find it interesting, the people who have spent all of their careers restraining government, breaking government, telling us it doesn't work, it can't work. The second something bad happens, the second corporate America does what they're going to do and what they always do, the first thing that they screamed out was what? Where's the government? And it's mind-blowing to me that, okay, I'm going to break something, and then when I need it, I'm going to go, well, where is it? You go, well, of course, dummy, you broke it. And this idea that they're the religious groups always kicking the poor, for instance, evidently Trump, I guess just again proclaimed himself the law and order president. He's now talking about, brutal ways of ending, I guess ending crime is the idea of doing this. We're going to end crime somehow. And how we're going to do this is we're going to go beat up on the homeless and the mentally ill. We're going to go and use, really aggressive, harsh tactics, like, throwing him in a jail cell freezer so that his body temperature is 72 degrees so that he dies in custody after a couple of weeks. Or you're going to starve him to death like they did in Arkansas. Because, that's what we do with the mentally ill. It's disgraceful what these folks have done. And here again, these are people who keep telling us end times are near. In fact, you got all these rich people who are preparing for the apocalypse by moving out west and building bunkers and all kinds of stuff because they know eventually we're going to wake up to the reality that we've been getting screwed for so long that we're going to put down the red hat and the blue hat. And we're going to end up coming after them, which is why they're trying to secede. Secession's on the table, folks. There's a political party, the Republicans. I want to do it again. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1846. That was the day Sarah Bagley became the first female telegraph operator. She was hired at the office in Lowell, Massachusetts. Sarah spent weeks studying the electrical theory behind the new technology and began her job in earnest. She soon quit in protest after learning her pay was far less than her male counterparts. Bagley was no stranger to labor struggles. She was among the many Lowell textile workers who struck in 1842. Bagley was one of the founders of the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. She fought for the 10-hour day and better working conditions in the mills. Sarah also helped to found the labor paper, The Voice of Industry. When the Reform Association demanded state investigations into working conditions at the mills, Bagley stated, quote, "Is anyone such a fool to suppose that out of 6,000 girls in Lowell, 60 would be there if they could help it? Whenever I raise the point that it is immoral to shut us up in a room 12 hours a day, I am told that we have come to the mills voluntarily, and we can leave when we will. Voluntarily," she said. "The whip which brings us to Lowell is necessity. We must have money. A father's debts are to be paid, an aged mother to be supported, a brother's ambition to be aided, and so the factories are supplied. Is this to act from free will? Is this freedom? To my mind, it's slavery." Bagley returned to Lowell's Hamilton Mills after quitting the telegraph office. She briefly continued her activism until she married and moved to Brooklyn, New York. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Your doctor is out and unable to see you now. Not out for lunch or out on vacation, but out of medical practice. America's perverse healthcare system, which sublimates care to the profiteering demands of Wall Street speculators who essentially own today's system, has been driving out hordes of nurses, pharmacists, and now doctors. These practitioners take their Hippocratic oath seriously. First, do no harm. Yet, again and again, they see corporate managers of hospital chains, physician clinics, etc., doing severe harm, routinely slashing staffing levels, eliminating services, rejecting low-income patients, and raising prices, all to prop up the profits of rich absentee investors. A prominent physician recently wrote that in 2021 alone, 4 times more doctors quit the profession than joined. He says his colleagues are demoralized by, quote, "the disease systems for which we work." The disease is money. The primary measure of care is now how much profit the system generates for its uncaring corporate owners, so one's health is largely dependent on one's wealth. The morally abominable result is that hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths are occurring each year. Yes, profit-based health care is a killer. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's time to be blunt. For-profit health care is the creation of profiteers and the politicians they buy. It's insane to let their greed dictate the allocation and quality of this essential human need. Luckily, a better way is right in front of us. Medicare. This enormously popular public program of universal coverage for each and every American over 65 has proven to be an effective and fair system that is far cheaper and much, much more caring than Wall Street's privatized scheme. So let's eliminate the profiteers by extending Medicare to all of us. To help, go to ourrevolution.com/issues.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, this next thing just has me, wow. You may remember during the Super Bowl there was an app ad, I guess it was, this Temu, I think it was called. Evidently, it's now one of the most downloaded apps in the country, and interestingly enough, it's China-based. Interestingly enough, there's a little loophole that, again, screws working people over, and I'm shocked that people would download it. I looked at it, I'm going, no thanks. But here to share some thoughts on what this is and maybe why we should not. Just a thought, maybe why we should not. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's good to be with you as always.
So walk me through this Chinese shopping app, Temu. What is it? I'm trying to figure out why is it here, but walk us through it.
Yeah. I wish I could say that I knew more about it, but I'm not going to download it, right? Either. But here's the deal. Yeah, if you saw the Super Bowl, you probably saw this ad for Temu, and you're wondering, what the heck is it? And there's another brand called Shein, Shein, which is a Chinese based fashion direct-to-consumer seller, and I'll tell you what these have in common in a second. So Temu is a little broader, not quite, not quite Walmart or Amazon, but it's got more stuff that people can buy at impossibly low prices. And the way it works, and this is the thing that folks should understand. First of all, obviously, if it's based in China, it has to answer to the Chinese Communist Party, and so they can provide you whatever assurances, on your data and your browsing and what have you. But at the end of the day, the Chinese Communist Party calls the shots on that. So that's number one. Number two, the prices that you're able to get on it are impossibly low because the app allows purchases that evade customs and duties law. And there's a feature of the law called de minimis. And so I don't know how often you travel abroad to like Mexico, Canada, or other places, Rick, but when you come back, you always have to do a customs declaration.
Yeah, no, I've gotten busted there, so yeah, I know all about it. Tried to bring back
maybe
Cuban.
This is a bad example. No.
Tried to bring back Cuban cigars from Mexico. Yeah, I got caught.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay, well, you have to declare the amount of like stuff that you're bringing back into the United States that you bought abroad, and there's a threshold for travelers. Like if it's below a certain amount, you don't have to pay any duty at all. Okay, that's called the de minimis threshold for bringing in imports without tariffs attached to them. The problem is that this is like there's a loophole, and all these companies are jumping through it. Amazon is, the Shein is, Alibaba, and now Temu, where they're selling stuff straight from Chinese warehouses to consumers. They're not going through any middleman retailer, so there's no tariff being paid on these products. And so the irony of this, and hang on, the retailers, and believe me, I have many problems with them, like Target and Walmart. They are at least having to pay tariffs on imports that they're bringing in to the United States. And so, unbelievably, these companies like Temu are undercutting these other big box stores amazingly. If you didn't think it could get any worse, it has. And so, unfortunately, it is the #1 downloaded app on the App Store, on the Apple's App Store right now. And number 2 is another Chinese app, and number 3 is TikTok. So it is, taking us by storm, I guess.
Now, is that here in the U.S. or is that globally? Or
no, that's in the United States, I believe.
What does that say about us? I mean, we're in this weird kind of moment where, look, I was just talking a minute ago about the fact that, and we're about the same age, that I can't get it through my head how we've got Republican representatives who are siding with Russia, saying we should be pulling money out of Ukraine, and I can't get my head around. No. The Chinese app and people willingly going, yeah, I don't care. I don't care if the Chinese Communist government has all of my information and can monitor every keystroke. Because if you look at TikTok and their terms of service, the amount of information that they have access to, your photos, anything on that phone, your keystroke patterns, all of that stuff, I maybe I'm just old, but I don't feel comfortable letting you have that information, let alone the Chinese Communist government.
Yeah, it's a bad idea all around, which is why the people who are downloading it are teens who don't have fully formed frontal lobes for long-term decision making, and that others who are pretty carefree about things, young people who enjoy the content but don't think about the consequences, right? And so it is it's a challenge. It's this kind of like short-termism. It's like gimme right now, and if there's consequences later, well, there might not be. I'm not going to worry about those. But the problem is, for as bad as we thought it was, that big box stores were undermining and disrupting the retail system. This whole de minimis threshold loophole that a bunch of other of these apps and online sellers have found is just going to wreak havoc on commerce, and not for the good, by the way, not for the good. This is disruptive in a wrong way. And they're going to bring in these products that are disposable. Some of them may be made with exploited labor or forced labor.
And who knows what kind of materials are in them? I mean, we've heard stories
Sure.
of kids toys being painted with lead paint. You had the baby formula a couple of years ago with melamine in it that were making kids sick, and I think killed a couple.
The dog food.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, all of that stuff.
Right.
So
Yep.
let me ask you this, and maybe maybe you don't know. When you're buying directly from the Chinese warehouse and you're giving your credit card information, your money, or however what guarantee you have you're actually not going to just get ripped off? I mean, I see a lot of this stuff where, hey, you can buy this kayak for $40. And I know people have given them the $40 and never saw the kayak. It's one of those things that goes back to when I was a kid. If it's too good to be true, it probably is too good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think that in the case of Temu, that's a great question. We'll see how that works out. In the case of a lot of the online retailers that are just providing a platform and other merchants are selling on it, Amazon gets a nice out thanks to that, Section 230 or whatever. It's like, oh, we're just hosting this. We're not responsible for anything that happens on it. And so you're right. It is hard. It's a lot harder to get that stuff back than it is from an actual retailer. But this is something we should keep an eye on. And I mean, let me just say there is one thing that we can do about this, obviously, that other than not utilizing the app, and it's closing this de minimis threshold. And there's actually legislation that would do that. I think Congressman Blumenauer from Oregon was one of the sponsors. It's had bipartisan support. I actually think it passed the House of Representatives as part of their technology package last year, but the Senate didn't include it. And so that's something that could be done, actually, is closing that de minimis threshold. So that they can't get this loophole, because those deals won't look so good, really, after a lot of that. And and it's not subject to the other customs requirements. So Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act not applying to it and all of that. So I shake my head too. I'm like, how they're specifically doing this stuff so that they can do this end around about all these responsibilities and obligations that importers are supposed to have.
No, as I say about a lot of our billionaires, behind every great billionaire is a great crime. I look at Bezos. He didn't pay local sales tax for years and years and years, and gave him a competitive edge. This is again one of those things. You find the loophole, and our problem is we're too slow to slam this stuff closed. This should have been up and down already. This should have been no partisan. This should be something that everyone goes, yeah, we should stop this. This is a bad idea. I can't imagine. Is there a good argument for allowing this to happen?
There's not a great argument for allowing it to happen, other than the companies that like it, like FedEx or Amazon or whatever, thinks it's going to be unfair and hard to enforce. It could, because it changes their business model, right? They don't want to have to deal with it, and they've kind of built a lot of it on the fact that they could do this like direct to consumer stuff and evade customs and tariff law. So, we're going to do everything we can to expose this, and we're certainly going to support the de minimis reform legislation. And we're going to push the Biden administration to see if we can do something about it administratively as well, because it's just not. I mean, it defeats the whole purpose of having rules if you can just totally work around. I mean, it's not even ignoring the rules, because there aren't rules. I mean, they're just they're not they're completely evading the rules.
No, but this is one of those things. What's it going to take? Is it going to take kids dying from melamine being in the baby formula? Is it going to take Is it going to take more of the horrible? And now with nobody watching and nobody able to do anything, and good luck trying to sue them. I mean,
Right.
This is where I keep coming back to. As a consumer, we've got to be aware of where our protections are. Just like corporate America, they were crying and carrying on, they're stealing our intellectual property. Well, you're the moron that went over there. Had you stayed in a place where we have protections for intellectual property, you wouldn't have this problem. But we don't do that.
No, not enough. And so, part of this is corporate accountability. Part of this is legislative legislative reform. And it's not an accident, Rick, that these apps are being targeted towards kind of, the young and the vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, oh wow, I can get this I can get this new dress for $10. This thing looks amazing, and not thinking about the consequences.
And
you
bring it, you get it home, you wear it once, and it falls apart.
Yeah, right.
Or it turns your skin green.
Yeah, yeah. As they would say in the old country, it's a schmata. So just like an old rag. So, but you think you're getting a good deal on it. Yeah.
Now it's interesting because I was looking at Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut's tweet about social media and how there's a loneliness epidemic in America today. It's driven by social media companies that build addictive products and an economy that leaves too little free time, and neoliberal economics, which has gutted the power of local communities. He says politicians should wake up. And I go, look, I look at these social media apps that keep feeding us this poison. In China, they don't allow 13-year-olds to see the same TikTok that they're shoving down our 13-year-olds. And I look at it myself. I look at some of the video files and the kind of content that they send me repetitively. There's got to be some kind of restriction, some kind of I don't know. There's got to be something, and I know our Supreme Court today hasn't given me much hope, but there's got to be something that pulls some of this stuff back.
Yeah, it's the what you referred to, and Senator Murphy from Connecticut, really good guy. Has been focused on this, this dimension of loneliness that, a lot of people suffer from, old, young, middle-aged, particularly people who have felt displaced from work. And then what feeds into that? And you're right, social media, big part of what feeds into that and drives it, rather than creating a community necessarily, can be used to point out differences and can drive people into kind of deeper, darker places as well. The fact that the deindustrialization has been very isolating, and Rick, I'm sure you see this in Pennsylvania and the other communities you've been in. That that factory, that union or whatever, was the glue that held everything together. And when that's gone, people go their separate ways, and they lose those connections. And so it's been really, really hard. And obviously people are still, a lot of people in society are still working through how to talk about these issues, because they are complex. In many cases they deal with mental health crises that unfortunately are still mischaracterized quite a bit. But at the core of this is an examination of where there should be some accountability and how we can prevent a lot of this, Rick, to your point.
Yeah.
And because I think there's a difference between complete state regulation of all technology and media and the crazy wild, wild west where anything goes, and there's an unbelievable amount of harmful content on there that has been shown to drive people to do all sorts of unbelievably unimaginable things.
No. Look, I just look at my Twitter feed, the comments that I get from people a lot of time. And fortunately, I have thick skin. It doesn't bother me. But, someone who takes their identity from how many likes or how many shares or how many retweets they get, and that's who they think they have to be. That kind of negativity, that kind of just vile hatred, I know could harm someone's mental status. I don't think it's healthy, because sadly, I think we're the worst versions of ourselves almost in every situation on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is completely true. And it is, it's not a substitute for conversation, where the tendency is to be more civil. Which is what we need, really. We can agreeably disagree, but on social media, that seems heck of a lot harder to do.
No, it is. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. I want to get into something positive here now, not because now I'm all flipped out here because now we're talking about social media, which I've been railing on with my kids because you've got young kids too. It's about making sure they don't get hooked on this stuff in the wrong ways, making sure that they have earned self-esteem and all of that stuff. And anyway, I want to talk about this EV charger rule that is stressing Made in America, because I think this is good stuff. This is important stuff. This is what we should be highlighting every day. The fact that we've got a president and an administration that's saying, you know what, if we're gonna remake the future, let's remake it with American products and American workers doing that. And I think this EV charger rule is a good first step.
It's an awesome first step. And let's first stipulate that no matter what your position is on the combustion engine or electric vehicles, eventually electric vehicles are going to be widely adopted because they're going to be cheaper to operate.
Yeah.
Okay. That is just fundamentally true. That may not be true at this moment, but it is going to be true very, very soon. In fact, I just read that the price of a Tesla Model 3 now is lower than the price of the average car out on the market. And so let's just, setting aside all that other stuff, let's just mention that. So these cars are going to be made somewhere, and all this apparatus, the charging equipment, is going to be made somewhere. Question is, are we going to make it? Are we going to make it in the United States? We're going to import all of this stuff from China or wherever else. And so what this administration has done is make sure that the charging network that's going to be out there when you get out on the interstate highway and you need to stop by and take the 10 to 20 minutes to charge up, that all of that equipment, no matter who the maker is, if they're going to get a federal subsidy to put it in, it's got to be made in America, starting right now. And then it has to be made in, it has to not only be assembled in America, but a lot of the content has to be also from the United States within a year, too.
They were saying, I think the number was like 55% of the
55%
components within a year.
Yeah.
Now, are they planning on moving that down the road to a higher number?
I hope so. Yeah, because they are doing that with other things, and all of the iron and steel has to be melted and poured in the United States, 100% of that. Okay, and so what this has done, Rick, and I hope your listeners get this because this is important. Already, you have a massive amount of investment around the country of companies that are building EV factories all over the place to build these chargers. At Tritium in Tennessee, there's companies in Ohio and Illinois and in California and in Texas and in Bowie, Maryland, and all over the place. I mean, there's a massive number, and there'll be more. There'll be more too. And so it is like this industry literally didn't exist a few years ago. It didn't exist. And so this is a great example of how if you have some investment resources, like if you have some federal money available and you have a Buy America requirement, that you can spurt up a new industry in the United States where we didn't have one before. We simply did not have one. And so this is awesome. And we're at the very cusp of this. And so I think it's really exciting. And it's how industrial policy is supposed to work, is designed to work. And again, for anybody who says, well, we shouldn't be putting money at this, it's like, look, these things are going to be coming from somewhere. They'll be coming from South Korea or China or Europe or Japan. I want those jobs to be American jobs. And so I think that this is a great utilization of this policy to get us to a goal that's going to be good on a number of different levels for America.
Yeah, and I just don't want them to be American jobs. I want them to be American union jobs. Because as I say all the time, we got tons of jobs. They're just not that great right now. When we make them union jobs, they're going to be better. You're going to have better wages, health security, retirement security. That's what we need. When we did our 8-state tour, we keep coming back to people going, I don't miss the factory so much. I miss the people I worked with. I miss the security that the wages brought. I miss the wealth and the opportunity that I was given. They missed the job for what they were able to get from it. They put up with the work. They shortened their lives. They did all that. But it was about how they made their families better. And I think that's what we need to be talking about when we talk about these jobs. Yeah, we want to bring them back, but what kind of jobs are they going to be? That's my view. But this is good stuff. As always, great news when we can talk about making things in America. But Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
You bet, Rick. Happy to join you. Keep up the great work.
Thanks so much, our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out their website, AmericanManufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media. I can take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1868. That was the day that the governor of California signed into law the 8-hour workday. The law was the result of a strong organizing effort led by California's trade unions. The call for the 8-hour day had gained traction across the U.S. labor movement after the Civil War. In the San Francisco area, the Carpenters Union helped lead the effort. Other trade unions soon joined the cause. They held a parade in June of 1867 that saw more than 2,000 laborers marching in the streets. The marchers were organized in order of when their union local had adopted the 8-hour platform. Ship joiners, bricklayers, lathers, and more joined the carpenters in a public demand for a standardized workday. The trade unionists also organized politically. They backed candidates to the state legislature that supported the 8-hour cause. Their efforts got results. An 8-hour bill was introduced. Sadly, it excluded agricultural workers, but the bill was passed and was signed into law. In San Francisco, the trade unionists celebrated their hard-fought accomplishment. Workers from Oakland sent representatives to join the parade. The law went into effect 60 days after it was passed. But like many of these early laws regulating wages, hours, and conditions, the law did not include the mechanism for enforcement, leaving an opening for employers to skirt the law. Soon after its passage, an economic depression further impacted enforcement, as hard times led many workers to take jobs that violated the law. Despite the legislative victory, the battle for the 8-hour day had not been won. The labor movement had to continue its fight for 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I love the fact that we're talking about making things here in the U.S. and that the Biden administration is doing what they said they were going to do. I mean, this is important stuff. This is stuff that, a couple of decades down the road, we're going to look back on and go, this was a transformational moment. And we're going to be grateful that we had someone who, maybe didn't talk the talk, but man, walking the walk. You remember during the Trump years, we were talking about rebuilding infrastructure. Every week it was infrastructure week. Now you got a guy who's got a bill pushed through, put some political capital behind it, and we're going to rebuild our infrastructure. He's talked about creating jobs that are American jobs, for union jobs that are going to support families. We're going to look back on this in a couple of decades and go, wow, this was important. This was an important era. I think he is doing that kind of job, regardless of what the right wing is whining and complaining about. This is a transformational time. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back.
The impact of rising seas is already creating new sources of instability and conflict.
Sea level rise set to displace nearly 1 billion people in coming decades, UN warns. Ice coverage of the Great Lakes hits record low, Plus, Biden EPA restores limits on toxic mercury pollution rolled back by Trump.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Ohio officials are trying to get folks to come back home, reassuring residents that the air in East Palestine remains safe to breathe. Yes, pay no attention to your lying lungs. The tingling means the air is working.
This is your 14th anniversary Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, happy 14th anniversary of the Green News Report.
Thank you to you too.
Now beginning our 15th year of connecting the climate crisis dots in a way that really no one else in the nation over our public airwaves has done consistently for 14 years now. By the way, 100% listener supported. Congratulations to you, Desiree.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Thank you.
Now, on to the news.
Okay.
A series of new studies warn of the long-term destabilizing impacts of rising sea levels. Data compiled by the World Meteorological Organization shows global sea levels have risen faster on average since the year 1900 than in any century in the past 3,000 years. A new study warns previous projections of sea level rise underestimate the risk, finding that twice as much land in developing nations will be inundated by rising seas than previously predicted.
Not good, although scientists have been underestimating all of these problems for, at least 14 years.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the UN Security Council late last week that the rate of sea level rise itself is accelerating and warned of widespread impacts, including saltwater intrusion contaminating drinking water supplies. Guterres called rising seas a threat multiplier that will disrupt and destabilize global society. He said unless there is an organized international effort to get ahead of the problem, 1 in 10 people could be driven from their homes in coming decades.
The consequences of all of these are unthinkable. Low-lying communities and the entire countries could disappear forever, and we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land, and other resources.
A different study in Nature Communications warns that in a moderate emission scenario, sea levels will continue rising through at least 2150 and likely thereafter due to the delayed response of the massive Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets. At the current rate, global average sea levels are likely to rise by 3 to 5 feet by 2100. The researchers conclude that because of humanity's delay in cutting fossil fuel use, even if governments achieve their promised emissions cuts under the UN Paris Agreement, quote, it would be insufficient to slow down the rate of global sea level rise.
An average of 3 to 5 feet by the end of the century.
Yep. In other news, widespread devastation in Brazil's Sao Paulo, which was hit with record rainfall of nearly 24 inches in a single day, which triggered deadly flooding and landslides that have destroyed at least 50 homes and killed at least 36 people.
You would think after 14 years I would no longer be surprised by these kind of stories. Amazing.
Several cities in the region have canceled their Carnival Festival, a major source of tourism revenue.
I guess they have.
In the Great Lakes, a new study confirms that ice extent on all of the Great Lakes has hit a record low, even though we are now supposed to be at the peak of ice season. The historical average for mid-February is at least 40% ice coverage on the lakes, but currently it's only 6%. According to NOAA data, ice on the Great Lakes altogether has declined 71% since the 1970s. Meanwhile, taxpayers are funding the fossil fuel industry's destruction. Bloomberg News reports that even as the world's governments are taking action to cut fossil fuel use in the future, governments last year gave a record $1 trillion in taxpayer subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, the main driver of climate change. Combined government subsidies for oil, natural gas, electricity, and coal hit an all-time high in 2022, even as soaring energy prices contributed to crippling inflation.
And even as the fossil fuel companies enjoyed record profits last year.
Finally, some good news for things that breathe. The Biden EPA has reinstated Obama-era regulations limiting toxic mercury pollution from coal-fired power plants that had been stripped away by the Trump administration. Mercury pollution from power plants is a potent neurotoxin that damages brain development in babies and children and causes heart disease in adults.
Well, there you go. After 14 years, one positive story. I'll take it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a study from the UK, this is one of those things that I find interesting. Why is it that other countries seem to be trying to figure out how to lighten the workload, while here in this country we got Congress going, get those lazy workers back to the workplace. Never mind the fact that they were more productive working from home and remotely. Never mind that they were happier. You get them back there, make them commute. And look, I did the DC commute today. Oh my! And this is when they're not even in session. I'm about 113. I'm 113 miles away from the capital. It took me almost 4 hours. And you go, well, why? Because just bumper to bumper traffic all the way. 270 was a nightmare coming back. And it's one of those things where, people are happier. They don't have to commute. They're more productive at home, and they want to stay. So other countries have gone, hey, well, what do we think about, maybe, because we did this. Understand, you think about the New Deal. You think about the Fair Labor Standards Act, which set a minimum wage and a maximum hour laws. This is the baseline. We haven't done that kind of thinking since 1938. The Fair Labor Standards Act. We haven't done that since 1938. In fact, nobody who voted for that is alive. Nobody who read about it in the newspaper is still alive. That's how long it's been since we've done anything on our labor law front. But in the UK, they're calling it the largest ever trial of a 4-day work week. And what they found is that most companies are pretty happy with it. In fact, most of the companies who participated aren't going back to the 5-day work week. And a third of them have already made the change permanently. Now, I guess out of 61 organizations, about 2,900 workers in this study volunteered to have the shorter work week. I guess the period was back from June of 22 to December of 22. Evidently, there are only 3 companies who have said, yeah, maybe we're going to hold on, we're going to pause this. 2 are still considering shorter hours. So out of 61 organizations, only 1 has already gone back to the 5-day work week, because it shows. The study is conclusive. Gain in revenue because the productivity went up. Employee turnover drops because people are happier. I know, happy employees. Why would you want that? And you have lower burnout. People are spending more time doing things that they like other than working. Understand, work is not fun. That's why they call it work. And my mind went into this place. Why aren't we doing that stuff here? How come we haven't talked about, since AI is coming, automation is coming, and fast. In fact, that study that was done about 5 years ago that said, half of the jobs we did back 5 years ago are going to be replaced by AI in 20 years. So we got 15 more years before we lose half of the jobs we had a couple years ago. And it doesn't seem like we're doing anything to move in that direction. I think we should be updating the maximum hour laws. I think we should seriously be updating the minimum wage laws. I think we should be talking about things like universal basic income so that families can survive. But no. We need tax cuts for the very wealthy because that's what we do in this country. And then we preach this idea of go get a job, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, of which, as a working class person, I'm not opposed to. In my life, if I need a little extra money, I work a couple extra hours. Maybe if we didn't have to do that as much, I don't know. Or maybe if you got every dollar you earned put into your paycheck. And I point to the Department of Labor today pointing out that a couple of investigations they've done got some positive outcomes. A Kazoo sushi burrito place chain in Florida. Evidently, they've got a number of locations throughout Florida. According to the Wage and Hour Division, they found that this Jacksonville food chain just decided, you know what, we're going to keep some of the employees' tips. And yeah, they're not going to make minimum wage, but yeah, screw them. We're going to take their tips anyway. I got to tell you, I can't. Whenever I think about tips, it's one of those things that infuriates me when I hear that someone stole someone's tips, because it reminds me of, and I'm gonna tell the story again and it's been what year? That'd been about like 1996. We're talking years ago, 27 years ago, and I'm still mad about it because it was a lot of money. I'm really ticked off about it. I had just met my soon-to-be future wife. And she was, volunteering at this horse riding place where I took the kid that I was volunteering as a big brother with, and we had a really nice ride. I made some jokes. She laughed at them, which meant, hey, I think I'm going to do okay here. So to make an impression at the end, they did this spiel about, hey, if you enjoyed the ride and you want to tip your tour guide, by all means, here are envelopes. So I put in, the cost of the ride. It was a lot. And, I didn't think anything of it because everything went really well with the person that it was intended for. We ended up getting married. We ended up having 3 kids, and we've been living happily ever after. But it was about 10 years ago, maybe 15, where I asked about that. I go, do you remember that? And she goes, no, we didn't get any of those tips. And I almost did backflips. Because, had I known, and this is one of those things, had I known that they were just going to steal all of these people's tips and then, do some half measure, I certainly wouldn't have given that much because it wasn't going to the people. And now she also told me, and this is one of those things that, again, makes me just, as a labor guy, furious. And had I known it at the time, I probably not literally, but figuratively have burned that place to the ground. She said that, the person who was in charge was staring out the window as I handed her the envelope, making sure that she put that envelope where it was supposed to be. So I'm going, it was that kind of harassment and intimidation. So when I look at these stories, it infuriates me. So you've got these employees at this Kazoo sushi, burrito place, Again, not a place that I'm going to go, but evidently, decided that, hey, we're going to consider you salaried. So yeah, you're going to work at a sushi burrito place. Which sushi burrito? You're going to work here, and you're just going to work here, and we're going to pay you something. We have laws in this country. You have to make a certain amount before you can be considered salaried. Clearly, they didn't make that amount, so they not only cheated them out of minimum wage, they cheated them out of overtime hours as well. So for these 100 workers, the Department of Labor went and got $215,000 in back pay. Now you go, doesn't sound like a lot of money. That's a lot of money when you consider that these people are working at the margins. These folks are barely scraping by, and to have a company like this, screw them over is really infuriating. I point to this other case in Illinois where the Department of Labor got a federal court to order this Illinois home health care provider to pay 69 workers $1.1 million in back wages. $1.1 million. Again, this is another one of those things. We're screwing you over on minimum wage. We're screwing you over on maximum hours, because here's what they used to do. Here's what employers were doing. This is what they're now. If they're doing this to you, contact your local wage and hour division because this is bull. They were giving them a day's pay. Saying you make a day's pay. So let's say they gave them $150 for the day, and you came in for the day, but you ended up working 24 hours. You got $150. And you go, well, wait a second. That's not minimum wage. Not even close to minimum wage. Well, that's what we pay. Now, they ruled that this company did a terrible job of record keeping. Of course they did. Because if you're going to break the law, you're not going to keep meticulous records of your law breaking. And they screwed these workers out of just massive amounts of money, which is why these 69 workers are going to get $1.1 million in back wages. And you go, well, that's great. That's great. Here's my problem with this. And this is a good story. This is one place. You know there are hundreds more out there doing this exact thing. You know that there are bad employers who are going to take advantage of people, especially poor people, because they can. Also, Department of Labor recovered about $20,000 for an employee who was illegally terminated by this Bank of Dudley, violating the Family Medical Leave Act. And again, this is another one of those moments where, well, any reason to get rid of you. And here's my problem with all of this. The penalties are pathetic. The penalties are minimal. There's a certain point where you go, shouldn't there be, because if we're in the land now of corporations are people, Mitt Romney said so, Supreme Court has affirmed it, shouldn't there be a death penalty for corporations? Shouldn't there be a moment where you go, this violation was so egregious, 69 people getting cheated out of $1.1 million in wages. That, to me, is really terrible. How much did those families suffer and struggle? How many tax dollars went to these folks in welfare and food stamps and LIHEAP and school lunch programs and all kinds of things that workers don't want but need? So I look at this stuff and I ask the question, look, I'm not a death penalty guy for people, but for corporations, oh yeah, we should line them up. Absolutely, because they're not people. At some point, there has to be a penalty so that they stop doing this kind of stuff. If you're getting cheated, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If any of these stories sound like, hey, that happens to me, let me know, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
All right, another train derailment. Yay! 31 cars sparked an emergency response in Nebraska now. Now here's the thing. This derailment in Ohio has got people's attention. We're now starting to pay attention to derailments. Wow, imagine that. This happens occasionally. You remember, I think it was 13, 14, we were having bomb trains, that were just these oil cars that were kept derailing and blowing up, and the one that blew up the town in Canada. So we paid attention for a little bit. Wow, there's oh my God, it's a derailment. Without understanding that these derailments happen a lot more often than we think they do. In fact, the number that I saw last year was something like 1,044 derailments last year. So if you think about it, and I'm not really great at math, but that's more than 2 a day. It's like two and a half a day. And yet we're just now going, wow, trains derail? Because we've got it in our head that things are safer than it really is. And you remember over the summer, we were talking with some of the folks from the rail unions, and they were saying, look, these trains aren't safe. All the things that they were saying now coming true. And you go, when do we wake up to this? On Monday, you had another train derail in Riverbank, California. Again, this stuff, and it was just 4 cars there, but this stuff happens. And for me, it comes back to, are we able to inspect the equipment? Is the equipment old and decrepit? Maybe the bearings are going to go bad. And do we have the people who have the skill and the know-how to make sure that what they take down the tracks is going to be safe? And everybody I've talked to has told me they can't tell me that with any certainty they feel confident that that's being done, especially when you look at the fact that we've given these corporations so much money. And we talked about Norfolk Southern, who took, what was it, $4.23 billion last year in stock buybacks, and they got a plan to take $15 billion more in the coming years, instead of reinvesting in their equipment and reinvesting in better trained people. No, we can't do that because it's all about the profit. And again, where I said at the beginning, you had this guy on, I forget who the news source was, but just a regular guy going, look, it's always about profit over people. It's always about these companies getting away with murder. It's always them being able to destroy our little piece of the world and then walk away and paper over it. And again, I keep coming back to this of, when do we put down the division? Because this is a uniting thing. This is something that should be pulling us together. This is something where Congress should be acting. There's a corporation who's making billions and billions of dollars cheating their workers out of sick days. That should have been a no-brainer. Now look, 207 Republicans voted against. Well, let me say, all the Republicans in the House voted against giving sick days to the workforce. And yet all I hear from people is, well, Joe Biden didn't give them sick days. No, it was every Republican who didn't vote for it because Congress did try. Now, do I think Biden should have handled the messaging better? Absolutely. There are things, same thing with where we are today. The messaging should have been much better, unquestioningly. But understand what the Republicans who are now screaming the loudest and pointing the fingers and doing the things that they're doing, they were no help. There was no help there whatsoever from them. So I do find it interesting that the Marjorie Greens and the Lauren Boeberts and the Gosers and the rest of them are screaming and hollering about, well, the government did a horrible job. What have you done? What have you proposed? Where is your legislation? I mean, because they're never going to do anything. It's never going to happen. Where's their legislation? Where's their oversight? And here's the thing, they're never going to do it because they don't believe in it. So when I see these derailments, and again, the reality is last year you had over 1,000, more than 2 a day. So are we surprised that we've had, one over the last couple of days, every day for the last couple of days? No, not surprising at all. Especially when you're talking about aging equipment, aging infrastructure, a workforce that's overworked, overtired, undervalued. That's not a great recipe. Now, I've had people who've emailed me and said, this is why we need to Without question, we need to take over and nationalize the rails. Not 100% sure about that, but it couldn't be much worse. I'm of the mindset we use antitrust laws to start breaking up these big companies. We start holding them accountable. We start tearing into these big cheating companies. Perfect example. I can't go a day without hearing. It's calmed down the last few days, but I couldn't go a day without hearing someone bring up eggs. Now, you remember what my response was? My response was very clear. This is all a supply issue because we had the avian flu, and you had the fact that we killed off half the bird supply, so that's going to cause a problem. But we also are now finding out, thanks to the folks over at Successful Farming, yes, there is a publication called Successful Farming, that the record-breaking profits from the eggs, price gouging. And look, when the cost of eggs go up by 138%, there's some collusion going on. There's some collusion going on when eggs jumped January 21 from $1.79 to $4.25 by December of 2022. In a year, they went that much. You had the flu outbreak with the avian flu. Yeah, killed off a bunch of things. But it's these companies who used that as an excuse to go, you know what? Here's a great opportunity. Because here's the thing. This is the interesting part of all of this. If there was truly a shortage, if it was truly the shortage that they kept telling us, and this is the same thing about what's going on in supermarkets across this country, the shelves would be empty. The eggs would be gone. There would be a scarcity. Because remember, supply and demand comes down to, if there's no supply, the price goes up. If there's an oversupply, the price goes down. I haven't walked into a supermarket and found the eggs gone. They're there. It's just that they're gouging us for it. Now remember, back when the toilet paper wasn't on the shelf and they were charging a lot for it, you could make a reasonable, cogent argument that there's a shortage. Have to pay more because there's a shortage. There's no shortages. This is just opportunistic corporate America doing what they do in an industry that's controlled by a handful of producers. So you have these handful of producers who are going, hey, this is a good chance to fatten the bottom line. And oh boy, did they ever. And this is one of those moments where I'm glad to hear that someone is considering FTC charges, because you've got to look at these main culprits and hold them accountable. And again, I'm all in favor of corporate murder. I'm all in favor of taking a couple of these corporations out back and undoing them. Because remember, do you remember the old conservative line? I do. I remember conservatives telling me that they loved the free market and they loved competition, and that's what's in the free market, it's competition. And yet what they keep pushing for is monopoly. So when you have a monopoly situation like we have now, there's a problem. Now, here's the thing. Now, what I just said about there being eggs on the shelf actually bore out, because in the 26-week period of 2022, the same period of 2021, Cal-Maine, one of the biggest egg producer, actually sold more eggs during a period when they killed off half the birds than they did the year before. So they're selling more eggs. Again, supply and demand. They're selling more than they did the year before, but profits went, oh my gosh, through the roof. So when eggs were $6, $7, $8 a dozen, as some people were telling me, that wasn't Joe Biden flipping a switch in the Oval Office. Those were those greedy you-know-whats in the corporate boardrooms going, oh boy, we got them. We'll get those egg eaters. And they did. Question is, who's going to hold them accountable? This is why Republicans hate government, because government's the only entity that can hold them accountable. And I say it's about time. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1868. That was the day that the governor of California signed into law the 8-hour workday. The law was the result of a strong organizing effort led by California's trade unions. The call for the 8-hour day had gained traction across the U.S. labor movement after the Civil War. In the San Francisco area, the Carpenters Union helped lead the effort. Other trade unions soon joined the cause. They held a parade in June of 1867 that saw more than 2,000 laborers marching in the streets. The marchers were organized in order of when their union local had adopted the 8-hour platform. Ship joiners, bricklayers, lathers, and more joined the carpenters in a public demand for a standardized workday. The trade unionists also organized politically. They backed candidates to the state legislature that supported the 8-hour cause. Their efforts got results. An 8-hour bill was introduced. Sadly, it excluded agricultural workers, but the bill was passed and was signed into law. In San Francisco, the trade unionists celebrated their hard-fought accomplishment. Workers from Oakland sent representatives to join the parade. The law went into effect 60 days after it was passed. But like many of these early laws regulating wages, hours, and conditions, the law did not include the mechanism for enforcement, leaving an opening for employers to skirt the law. Soon after its passage, an economic depression further impacted enforcement, as hard times led many workers to take jobs that violated the law. Despite the legislative victory, the battle for the 8-hour day had not been won. The labor movement had to continue its fight for 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Your doctor is out and unable to see you now. Not out for lunch or out on vacation, but out of medical practice. America's perverse healthcare system, which sublimates care to the profiteering demands of Wall Street speculators who essentially own today's system, has been driving out hordes of nurses, pharmacists, and now doctors. These practitioners take their Hippocratic oath seriously. First, do no harm. Yet, again and again, they see corporate managers of hospital chains, physician clinics, etc., doing severe harm, routinely slashing staffing levels, eliminating services, rejecting low-income patients, and raising prices, all to prop up the profits of rich absentee investors. A prominent physician recently wrote that in 2021 alone, 4 times more doctors quit the profession than joined. He says his colleagues are demoralized by, quote, the disease systems for which we work. The disease is money. The primary measure of care is now how much profit the system generates for its uncaring corporate owners, so one's health is largely dependent on one's wealth. The morally abominable result is that hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths are occurring each year. Yes, profit-based health care is a killer. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's time to be blunt. For-profit health care is the creation of profiteers and the politicians they buy. It's insane to let their greed dictate the allocation and quality of this essential human need. Luckily, a better way is right in front of us. Medicare. This enormously popular public program of universal coverage for each and every American over 65 has proven to be an effective and fair system that is far cheaper and much, much more caring than Wall Street's privatized scheme. So let's eliminate the profiteers by extending Medicare to all of us. To help, go to ourrevolution.com/issues.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Now here's a shock. Sit down. I know you're going to have to sit down for this. This is the shock of all shocks. In the month before the Norfolk Southern train derailed, now hold on, because this is going to be one of those shocking moments. Norfolk Southern just spent a huge amount of money on Republican politicians, gave money to DeWine's inaugural campaign. They gave a bunch of money to different political PACs because, hey, we don't want regulations, those pesky people saving regulations. No, we don't want that. It's very, very, very interesting. And the timing kind of curious as well. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on what's going on in Ohio as the cleanup continues. I've asked David Pepper to come talk with us. David's the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of the book Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
So are we shocked that Norfolk Southern gave a boatload of money to the inaugural camp to help get DeWine, this little party going? We surprised by any of that?
I never understand giving to these inauguration committees. I mean, the idea that that's a big thing, and it is just, I've never understood it. But no, I mean, I was on a phone call today with a bunch of Michigan book readers. It was a book club that read my book, and one woman said, I feel like the Norfolk Southern incident is a perfect summary of your book. Sadly, it is. I mean, these state houses, and especially state level governments, they basically have become the places where the private sector, large private interests, go to pay politicians to help them at the expense of the public. I mean, whether it's for-profit schools, whether it's lack of regulation, you name it, they pay the politicians to take something that would help the public and give it to them. In this case, it's a deregulated environment. In other cases, again, it's for-profit schools, it's first energy company bailouts. So, and who pays the price? Always the public. And who pays it most? The people who are most challenged in this 21st century economy, be it East Cleveland or East Palestine. I mean, and the people who have no one going to bat for them in these state houses, it always gets stuck on them. So no, so once you see the money flowing, it's just standard operating procedure. I mean, this is what these places do, especially the big interests and right-wingers and extremists have figured it out, that to get their agenda done, the single best place to go are these states where no one's watching, and they get it all done. And then, of course, when the bad stuff happens, and it always happens, they scramble and they immediately try and find any Democrat they can blame. But the truth is, I don't care if it's the foreclosure crisis, the opioid crisis, incidents like this, or just a general decline in wages, education, the inevitable outcome of these broken states are terrible public outcomes where everyday Ohioans pay the price for it.
Yeah, and Ohio's been that poster child state for a very long time. I look at the fact that, right now the first bill Republicans put forth in your House was a massive tax break and property tax break, and then cutting public education by $1.2 billion. Very telling to me. We're gonna enrich the wealthy and steal from children. It's the playbook. And then when things go bad, like you said, it's all Joe Biden's fault. And this is what they've done with this Norfolk Southern thing. Yeah. It's almost to the point now, if you listen to right-wing blather, they don't even talk about Norfolk Southern anymore. It's all about Buttigieg and Biden.
Yeah.
What great cover.
Yeah, no, it really, I think the ferocity of it is actually a tell that they know that they're the ones getting this money. They know that they've been killing, and there was a couple stories that came out on this in the last couple of days. They've been killing rail safety bills in the Ohio House and legislature for years. By the way, in some cases, to their credit, put forward by some Republican who's concerned, and the rest of them kill it. And so I think when you see this true sort of hyperspasm of finger pointing, it's a guilty conscience, or worse, it's a worry that they're going to put two and two together, that we're the ones, the legislators, the lobbyists, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, were the ones who have been stopping every single effort to protect communities from exactly what happened. And so they have to get into this, spasm of finger pointing about, who showed up when, as opposed to who stopped, chemicals from being declared a certain way, who stopped the braking systems from being required, who stopped needing, two folks working a train engine and not one. It's consistently the big interest stopping any legislation that protects the little guy from what they're doing.
Yeah, the best democracy money can buy. And you see it at play. But you know what I find interesting, and I've been from the beginning of the the outrage. I've been saying, look, it's amazing that the people who tell us that government can't, shouldn't, and doesn't do anything right, and that we're going to figure out how to sequester them and defund them and defang them, that when something goes bad, the first person they ask for is government. I mean, it's really a very weird kind of twisted thing, but they get away with it. And then look, and I'm going to beat up on Biden and the Democrats in this too, because they had an opportunity very early to use this crisis to have much better messaging. The sad reality is Republicans waited a bit, saw an opportunity, and they jumped all over the outrage.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that the lesson here is clear. And part of it maybe they were, the Governor DeWine, let's be clear. He was asked early on, well, J.D. Vance is blaming Biden. What do you think? He said, well, I talked to Biden like early on, and Biden said we'll do whatever we can to help. And I haven't really had to call him because I don't think it's a big deal. And so in some ways, I think the federal end, they were kind of following the normal procedure, forgetting that the far right doesn't care about any of that stuff.
Exactly.
They're going to go after you no matter what. So be empathetic, get your ears to the ground, and be responsive, even if the governor of the state isn't being all that responsive. And the press conferences that the governor had here, I'll give him credit. Our governor actually did a good job on COVID. He was pretty upfront about trying to deal with it. So this kind of surprised Ohioans. The message this time was, oh, we're hearing those anecdotes, but they're just anecdotes. If your pet dies, same process as usual, no special treatment, take them to the vet, just horrifically bad, tone. And my attitude is, if you're the feds and you're seeing that, don't let that lead you down the bad path.
Yep.
Go get aggressive. Now, I will give credit. The EPA director now has been on the ground for the second time in a few days. I think he's putting a face to it, trying to be responsive. But overall, we're in such a horrific political time that even following the usual procedures is going to get you burnt.
Yep. No, I said from the beginning they should have lined people up on the Pennsylvania border. They should have had all the people ready to go on the Pennsylvania border going, Governor, just give us the word and we'll step across the border.
And you don't want to politicize things, but communicate very clearly that you are there.
Yep.
Because we all have seen in the last week, Fox News just lies. So if they're going to lie about the things they've lied about, they'll go on about this and turn it into this massive thing. And I just think that's the environment we're in. Emergency response needs to be emergency response, but they communicate it very clearly as early as possible so you don't give the kind of opening that we talked about. And then the other thing I would say, and this is the other thing that we have to be good about, just like Biden did in the State of the Union, call their bluff. If they're going to say you're not doing anything, as I was talking about with Chris Hayes the other day on TV, bring forward the 2023 Rail Safety Act that incorporates all the things those unions were begging them to do, gets back to classifying all dangerous chemicals as dangerous, not just oil, adds the electronic braking, and call the damn vote. And then we can see where Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance really are. And I guarantee you, most of them will not be on the right side of it. So react now, but then go for it. And we saw Biden do that on Social Security at the State of the Union. It was an absolute home run. Do it here. Do it while they're still talking about it, because they're not going to want to vote for that stuff. As you said, we didn't know it all, but they're giving DeWine and half the legislature a lot of money to stop it, and they've stopped that stuff. We'll do that in Congress as well. Call them out on it.
Absolutely. No, and it's because I don't think Democrats message well. I love what the president's doing. I love a lot of the policies that are going out. We're investing in infrastructure. We're bringing back manufacturing. We're really, in my view, ending parts of neoliberalism that have destroyed manufacturing and doing it in a transformational way. But nobody knows it. We've got to be talking about this stuff and amplifying it so that people get it. And this is what I think Trump did better than anybody. Trump took credit for stuff that he wasn't anywhere near. But he's the greatest. He's the best. And that kind of messaging, I think Democrats should learn a little bit from.
Yeah, he's taking credit for the fact that there was FEMA came to East Palestine apparently on the day that he said he was coming here. So yeah, he's going to do it there. I've said this, I think, on your show before. It really is about, and this is where I like the EPA director, he's been walking in the town. Don't just go to a town and have a big speech in front of all the Democrats who are like somehow have earned their ticket to be at some big speech. Go, walk these places. And I actually, I do this a lot. Some of these towns are in such poor condition long before this kind of incident.
Yep.
That if you've got a pulse and you walk the town, you're frankly aghast about what the trickle-down agenda has left these towns in, the condition. And I honestly think the more we do that, again, you're walking through a town where 30% or less of the people voted for you, but who cares? It's an American town. Let's go to these places, just like we need to go to cities that are struggling too, and look around and don't have it be the big speech, have it be the truly human interface with a mayor who probably is the other party. But you're saying this town, no trains hit it, nothing else has happened, but you too look like a ghost town.
Yeah.
Your roads are falling apart, and then make the connection. That infrastructure money isn't just for that massive bridge in Cincinnati, it's also for towns like yours.
No,
and by the way, on that, no one would be better than that than Joe Biden from Scranton, Pennsylvania, because he knows this story of these towns. And we have to do a better job of really getting on the ground and having those conversations.
No, and this is how you reconnect with those communities, because there's a video going around of one of the residents saying, it's always, profit over people, and it's, they're cowards. And, that's the sentiment. This is an opportunity to start uniting people around an idea that it is about big money over individuals. It is about the bad policies that have caused the heartache that a lot of these rural communities and high poverty areas have gone through, which Democrats haven't taken advantage of it.
Right.
You're listening to
absolutely. I mean, it's just, there's so much commonality between the struggles in the struggling parts of our urban communities and these small towns. They need the same things. They need an injection of support in public education, infrastructure, higher wages, healthcare, dealing with the opioid crisis, on and on. It's the same set of needs. The problem is that the very people they're electing, and I don't say this to criticize, it's just a fact, are voting against the very things these places need.
Yep.
And we've got to get in there and start making that case.
And
that we're for the infrastructure you need. Even if your local person isn't voting for it, we are, and we want to bring it to you. Even though you don't think it's for you, we're here to deliver things that your town needs.
Yeah. And what we get out of the right is, Marjorie, Trainwreck Green with her, we need a national divorce, stoking that urban rural divide and pitting people against each other.
Yeah.
This should be a moment to unite, not continue to tear us apart. And this, I think, is what I think her tweet was all about, continuing that division, because this could be a moment where the rurals and the urbans come together. Because, Ohio you had that explosion in Southeast Ohio there in Bedford at the metal fabricating plant. Now you got this thing in East Palestine. Communities are literally on fire.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The divide, they need to break up what could be a very common, coming to understand that, middle class Ohioans, white and black, are being screwed by this top-down, trickle-down deregulatory economics that has been the model in states like Ohio for a generation.
Yep.
And how do you do that? You get the dog whistle out. You on race clearly, but on other issues as well. Because if everyone all of a sudden wrapped themselves around what that one interviewee you mentioned said, which is we're so tired of the big corporate interests running roughshod over our towns, that would unite 80% of Ohio, because that's what's happening. That's why they have to divide on these other things. They cannot afford to have, they want to pit things against one another as opposed to letting that group unite and say, the heck with this broken model. And the giving from Norfolk Southern to DeWine, his lieutenant governor in the state house, that's in the end, and that's happening all over the country, and it happens to some degree in Washington. That's what's doing this. And we just have to be more clear about it and make the argument more clearly. And that's why, again, bring a bill forward, call a vote. And if you make a few people upset, who cares? I'm tired of the middle of the road. Well, that might offend. No, make it clear. Because by the way, what they are getting very close to doing is they are trying to act like I literally tweeted about some of this stuff, and some right-wing Republicans are tweeting back, "Oh, are you joking? It's the Democrats that are the big corporate party. We're not." I mean, they're trying to be the ones who get all that money and then say the Democrats are the ones who are doing it.
Yeah.
And so we have to make it crystal clear that it's the opposite. And you do that by communicating well, and you do that by putting bills forward and calling the roll and seeing where the votes end up.
So how do we put pressure on people to actually do that? And is there a movement to do this? Because, again, we can sit here and talk about what we would have done, what I would have done,
Right.
which, would have been 2 days after the derailment. I would have had people lined up at the border. I'd have had, I would have made an outward display of it. What do you do from this point?
Well, we have a new congressman in Cincinnati. You should interview him sometime. He was one of the Democrats who picked up a seat, knocked off a Republican, and Greg Landsman. He and I communicated within days of this. I said, you should push forward on this, on the regulation, on the braking. Now, again, they're investigating. We don't know all the reasons this accident happened, but it's broadly, we need to regulate stronger. And he's already looking into what can be done either directly through the White House or through Congress. So on that end, I think we just need to call our Congress people and say, we want to see things move forward on this. And you may be in the minority in the House, but call up Bill Johnson, who's the congressman who's on the river there where this happened. Ask him to sign on to it. Would he not? That would be a problem for him, right? I mean, and so I think on the congressional side, it's calling folks and saying, let's push this forward. Let's not be over political about it. It's like Social Security. If they're all of a sudden all saying they're for this stuff, well, that's the opening. Go for it. Don't even be negative about it. Like Joe Biden did at the State of the Union. Oh, really? You all are for this? Wonderful. We have something we can all agree on. I would do that right now.
Yeah.
And I do know that Pete Buttigieg in the last couple of days, I've liked this. He's getting letters from Marco Rubio only a year after Marco Rubio was sending letters saying, don't make rail safer. And I think he's now saying, I've seen some communications. Okay, well, the regulations are coming forward. I'm putting these forward. Will you support them? So I think a lot of it is if they're going to talk the way they're talking, that's an opening. I run right through it hard. And so if you have a Democratic congressman or even a Republican, wherever you're listening, call them up and tell them you want to see them move forward on it.
No, I'm right there with you. Last question I've got for you, because some of the reports we've seen coming out of there have been all over the map. Anything that you see going on there that you think has been going right? Anything you see going wrong? Thoughts on so far where we are?
I mean, I would say that the person who seems to have stepped up is, and I didn't see everything he said today, but the EPA director has now been there twice in the last 4 days. I think he's trying to be, kind of be the adult in the room of trying to explain, here's what we're worried about. Here's what our testing shows. The initial couple days, one thing that really made me uncomfortable was, of course, we want Norfolk Southern to pay for everything they've done, right? But in demanding they pay for everything they've done, I don't want them being the one testing the water.
Of course not.
I mean, that's horrible. Well, they were kind of driving the boat, or whatever the term would be, in the first, because everyone wants them to pay. But again, make them pay, but have someone else besides the people who caused the accident tell us everything's safe.
No, I want the EPA to do it and then send them a bill.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the first couple days, it was kind of unclear. Well, who's supposed to test the soil? They are? That doesn't sound good. Who's testing the water? I saw one account where they did the first round of water testing. Well, so again, who's going to trust that? So I think some of what's happened since then is, again, having figures like the EPA director come in and say, okay, we're the ones who are going to do the testing. We're the ones who are going to, if it's safe, it's us saying it, and not someone with a massive bias, or not someone who got a lot of money from someone with a massive bias. So I think trying to rebuild trust after too much silence, and then some open, they were supposed to be the ones to answer all the questions, and Norfolk Southern, they don't even show up to the meeting. Yeah. So we have all this week goes by where all this distrust is being built. which is, again, thinking about the people in the community, just terrible. You're sent back home and told you could drink the water, and the next day that Ohio health director is saying use bottled water. I mean, it really was poorly handled. And so I think the EPA, the national EPA director coming in and trying to bring some trust back, that seems to have been a positive step. No. And amid all this stuff, that's on the national side, that's the most important guy to show up at this moment. I mean, do the investigation, but have the guy, right now it's the health concern, have the guy who can speak to that best and be more of a neutral broker come in and build some trust back.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do. But, David, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Look forward to having you get back again real soon.
Of course. Take care.
Thanks so much. David Pepper, former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party. Make sure you check out his book, Laboratories of Autocracy, A Wake-Up Call from Behind the Lines. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Across the United States, workers enjoy the first Monday of September as their holiday. Labor Day has become known as a day for family picnics and community parades. But do you know how Labor Day really started? Labor Day was first officially recognized on this day in labor history. The year was 1887. At the request of union members and workers, several states had started discussing setting aside a working man's holiday. In 1882, the Central Labor Council of New York City held the very first Labor Day parade. That first parade saw some 10,000 workers proudly marching in the streets. 5 years later, on this day in labor history, Oregon became the very first state to officially declare such a working man's holiday. Also that year, Colorado, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York followed. By 1894, a total of 30 states across the nation had passed legislation for a similar celebration for workers and their valuable contributions to society. That same year, the federal government declared the first Monday of September officially Labor Day. Some critics in the labor movement have noted that Labor Day served as a more benign alternative to May Day. May Day is considered a more radical workers' holiday commemorating the 1892 Haymarket Martyrs Massacre in Chicago and the struggle for the 8-hour workday. May Day is celebrated by workers throughout much of the world. Recently, May Day marches and protests have seen a resurgence in the United States, especially around issues of immigrants' rights. Whether workers gather in September or May, it is an important time to remember our shared history and our continued struggle. United we bargain, divided we beg. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. So I want to wrap up with this story from Florida. What is it about Florida? Anyway, 57-year-old Florida woman evidently was shot in the back by her 6-year-old granddaughter. Turns out Granny left a holstered Glock in the little seat pocket near there in the back of the seat so that the 6-year-old could find the gun and then shoot Granny through the back of the seat. Injuries not life-threatening, but she got shot in the back, drove herself home. They life-flighted her out of there to the hospital where she has been taken care of. Now, here's where the reason I bring this up. I'm hoping Granny goes to jail. I'm hoping. I don't know why the most irresponsible people are the ones who have guns, especially around young children, but I think Granny should go to jail. This is one of those things, and I've had some gun enthusiasts, I will call them that, agree with me on this, that it's a responsibility that you got to take pretty serious, and leaving it laying around for a 6-year-old to use, generally I would say this is how we thin the herd, but she made it. So now I think she should be held accountable. And not just because she got shot, because a 6-year-old had a gun. But I guess, like that guy in Texas who left it in the bathroom for the third graders to find. Never any accountability. Anyway, want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.